Just kidding. Where have I been? I don't even know. To be honest, I've got a bad case of the mid-30s.
In like 60 years, I won't exist.
Plus, like most of anyone, I've been doom-scrolling war between petrostates and, like most Western men, battling an ever-present case of main character syndrome. I've had a brief dalliance with... But what version of this can I imagine that's going to affect me? And what can I buy to make it better for me? Is my Russian sharpener problematic now? And what about you? You're Russian too. No. I try and be a pretty self-aware prepper, which may be an oxymoron, but I do confess to just nudging my stocks of dry goods, water purification, candles and chicken feed from the reasonable towards the Uncle Pete is a bit eccentric category. I guess we're all on a rock hurtling through space to an invariable conclusion, so I suppose we should all just give ourselves a pat on the back really for getting through a day lately. I'm in a weird mood. Anyway, a neat little side quest in my main waypoint of tightening my stocks in my general ranch was that I worked out that I've only used this little Benchmade 945 for pretty much all of my cutting tasks, even really inconvenient ones, you know, like for sports. So I've got some thoughts on this knife that are actually probably amounting to some of the most thorough reviewing I've ever actually done, and it wasn't even really that intentional. Existential crisis knife review. Let's get through it. So the Benchmade 945, the mini version of the 940, a beloved knife. This one here is of course in the classic configuration. You've got your pink back spaces, you've got your green aluminium handle, and you've got your S30V blade. So materials wise, the aluminium will take about 500 years to fully degrade into trace elements, and the stainless steel over 1,000 years, which is of course dwarfing the decomposition rate of my human body, which after about 100 years, there'll be nothing left of at all. In fact, there may not even be proof of my existence unless my family really do spring for a really robust gravestone. And then that's of course assuming my great-grandkids at that stage will upkeep my gravesite, because if they stop paying after that 99-year lease is up, I just get dug up. So the 945 is kind of going for that pure EDC role, whereas the 940 would often play off as being a harder use knife, and that's mainly from YouTubers and folks like Mr. Wrangler Star using theirs as screwdrivers and sort of having the really weather-beaten green handles after a few years in play. Whether these can ever be hard use knives generally comes down to your opinion of the Omega sprung axis lock. Varying accounts of these guys on the internet. I've never had a problem myself, but the Omega spring can certainly break, reducing a hard use folding knife to simply a floppy piece of steel when that happens. So I've always just seen Benchmade 940s and all axis locking Benchmades really as just nice EDC knives that are mainly fun to play with and fun to open and close, as there is no detent required, at least not in a traditional sense. The blade with the lock depressed will flop open and closed, making for a nice smooth action, which is a bit of a treat. I often think to myself, how many precious hours that I will never get back have I sat around on a couch simply opening and closing my knife, and could I have used those hours to better effect? So one thing that has sprung out at me during my use of this knife, my sort of extended and for everything use of this knife, is that this knife is really not particularly great at slicing through things. It's quite a stout, stubbly blade, and the blade itself, yes, definitely seems to be geared more towards the harder use. I have turned my share of sprinkler head adjustment pins with the tip of this knife on a whim, and it's actually done pretty well all the time, apart from once where I got a minor bit of blade damage, which did sort of sharpen out quite easily. I've just been keeping a rudimentary stone sharpened edge on this guy, so it's about a 6 out of 10 in sharpness at all times, which is fine for the purposes that I've been using it for. You can get these nice and sharp and they'll do nice slicey cuts, but I've always found with these thicker blades and these thicker behind the edge blades, as this is, that fine edge kind of just ends up disappointing you in how quickly it evaporates. So keeping it at a nice working edge really seems to be the sweet spot. I'm barely touching it up and it's just continuing to cut nicely for me. That being said, nothing like a TRM Atom or even a Spyderco Para 3 in terms of passing through things nicely. That gliding through the cardboard isn't going to happen as easily with a 945 or indeed really a 940. These blades are made to be a little bit tougher and perhaps being forced into a little extra layer of knife abuse and not breaking on you or chipping on you or whatever. Ergonomically speaking, it's a small knife, and I remember my 940. I haven't re-bought the 940, but I think that's on the horizon because the main reason I like this knife, right, it's because of how it looks. I think this is the best looking knife. There's nothing I can say to convince you that if you don't agree with me, but I think this is the best looking knife, especially in this green and this whole configuration. I think this is the best looking knife. So that a few times. So to make it a bit more usable for me, I think I would scale back up to the 940. It's a little bit bigger, but it's still not a large knife. This is a small knife and the 940 is kind of like a medium-sized knife. I can't think of a world where I would bemoan that extra kind of ½ inch of blade and you know, ½ inch of handle and all that sort of thing. That maybe it's an extra 1.5 inches in total. I can't imagine a world where I'll bemoan that to the point where being like, I wish that this was smaller. But there has been a few times where I've thought, I wish this knife was just a little bit bigger. That may be to do with my hand size. I've got a large hand, that the bit doesn't even really get to the end of my palm. I don't have huge hands, but I definitely do wear a large size glove. And as such, I have on a few occasions felt wanting for a bit of extra grip area when using it for something more protracted and prolonged. So that's something that I probably will add to my collection. Perhaps even some kind of swap, or I'm not sure. What this has reaffirmed for me is that I love this design and I want these in my life, and I've really enjoyed carrying this as my only knife. And this could definitely be your only knife, or a great gift knife for someone expecting it to be their only knife. You could probably spring for a 940 or a 945 if you've got a smaller dad, and have a pretty nice time with it. If you've got a mother who might want to cut something from time to time, the 945 may fit her motherly hand a little bit better than the 940. It's definitely a high quality knife, high quality piece, and it feels generally high quality. See, I dropped it and it's fine. Oh. Bushcraft! So in terms of cons, negatives about the knife, yep, I'll cover the Omega spring, I'll cover it. Can't really relate to it on an anecdotal level from personal experience because I've always been fine, but they are, I guess, slightly at odds with the blade being very robust and hard use, having it on a perhaps more lighter weight locking system. Sure, that's a thing I suppose. Hasn't affected me though, so take that for what it's worth. It's a bit small for me. I think I would prefer if I could choose both at a time, like the start of a Pokemon game. I would choose the 940 over the 945 just for that little extra length, for sure. Materials wise, they're basic, they're more rudimentary. So S30V and aluminium, both fine materials in both applications. And you know what? You can scale up both price and materials for the S90V CF version, but I think for the use that I've been putting this knife through, just a good steel has been perfect rather than having a great steel, because I haven't been keeping it at a laser edge anyway. I've been keeping it in a nice, pleasantly sharp wedge of steel, and that's been doing the job for me. If it was an S90V, I probably wouldn't have really noticed that much. I haven't been keeping this, super fine, glidey sharp anyway. So S90V is great if you're after a steel to do that with, but if you're after just a blade to doof around with, S30V is absolutely fine. Price-wise, they're a little bit much. Benchmade in Australia, $300 for most of them by now, most of the folding ones, apart from the more basic plasticky Griptilians. And yeah, this does suffer the Benchmade tax. And because it's a bit of a premium design, I think they do, you never see these on sale, that's for sure. So, the 945, it's going to cost you about 325 Australian bucks, which is about about 210 US dollars exchange rate wise, maybe. And then, I don't know how much they are actually in the US, so maybe I'll put it on the screen, maybe I won't. Again, it's how much is a kilo of chicken breast. Here it's about 10 bucks for a kilo of chicken breast. And that's probably the best way to figure out how much your money is actually worth. But then again, it's all made up, none of it means anything, and everything is fake. So overall, I'm really enjoying my Benchmade 945. I would probably size up to the 940, but the shame about that is that you don't get to have the nice new knife to do a nice new knife review on, and people have been reviewing 940s for about 10 years now. So that was also something I had to weigh up. Yeah. All right. That's, I think, my review. I'm going to go and do some other stuff now. I got to get back to this mules. I got to get my life back on track, because you know what? It's a miracle we're here. It's lucky that I woke up in this body and not in a body, in Myanmar. So let's just try and put that kind of spin on things for the moment, because I think that's the best I've got.